How's it going, everyone? My name is Logan Kilpatrick, and I'm the community manager for the Julia programming language. And as part of that role, I've been an admin and a mentor for Google Code-In, Google Summer of Code, and Google Season of Docs. And today is part of the Google Summer of Code Student Summit. I'm really excited to share why open source non-technical contributions are super beneficial for you as a contributor, but also the community at large. So I want to sort of lead off with a more general statement, and that's there is more to open source than code, and I would argue there's a whole lot more to open source than just code. So what are some of these different areas where people can actually go and contribute? So, there's things like social media, design, asking questions on Stack Overflow is an open source contribution, even though it might not be, making a pull request to a repository, it's still a valid and helpful open source contribution. Having a conversation with your friends about open source, something like that, around programming in general, I think, depending on the nature of the conversation, could be an open source contribution. When we talk about this is something that I like to picture in my mind, the sort of arc of a contribution, the arc of somebody who's contributing to an open source project. And, somebody might just start out, again, talking to someone about open source, having a conversation at school about, what tools people are using, what are some ways that I can get involved and, sort of develop technical skills. That's sort of what I would like to think of as the first step. The second step might be someone, starting to tinker with a project and opening an issue perhaps, and then potentially going and, writing about open source via a blog or making a documentation contribution perhaps. And sort of the final culmination of this contribution arc or this pathway that I see is the actual code contribution. And again, a lot of us sort of listening to this and part of the Google Summer of Code Student Summit might take sort of this contribution pathway for granted. You also may not. This also may have been the exact sort of pathway that you went on that got you to Google Summer of Code. So it's just something to keep in mind as you move forward. The other thing that I wanted to really quickly highlight is that being an actual developer in the open source space isn't the only role that's available. There's a ton of different ways that you can contribute to open source and sort of push the community forward and things like that don't involve opening pull requests and sort of contributing to the core technology. And a few of those different opportunities are, being a community manager, being a developer advocate, things like that. Those are both sort of super hot roles in the open source space at the moment. So when we talk about, how can you as a student actually benefit from making a non-technical contribution, and also how is the community being impacted by that? So if we talk about from a student perspective, again, when you're talking about a lot of these non-technical contributions, a lot of them have like underlying basis in communication, and whether it's writing a blog post, making a YouTube video, talking in some sort of capacity, giving a talk at a hackathon, all of those and many contributions that are similar to that are underlined by this notion of communicating about a technical topic with other people. The other thing that I would argue from a community impact standpoint is that a lot of these open source contributions, and what I found in my role as the community manager for the Julia language, a lot of these contributions that I'm making are really building bridges within the community. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of these sort of fragmented technical repositories, smaller niche communities that exist, and there's not a lot of sort of crossover between all these different pieces of the project. And I think, again, these non-technical contributions, blog posts, documentation, asking questions on Stack Overflow, making YouTube videos, all of those things help sort of reconnect the community back together. And the last piece, again, from a student's perspective is, broadening your own scope and skill set as far as making contributions go. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced some people that non-technical contributions are important and worthwhile to think about. So what can you actually do to get started? I think this is a great question. So one of the first things is reach out to people. If you know people sort of in the community are leaders or might have good ideas as far as what you can do, reach out to those people, ask them, say, hey, I'm really interested in contributing, perhaps maybe not opening a pull request and doing some code, but some other capacity. Are there specific areas where, it might be helpful for me to jump in and make a video or start working on Stack Overflow or whatever it is? The other option is to sort of take the permissionless approach. And what I mean by that is just just go and do stuff, and people will see the value in it. It might take a little bit of time, but I think people will see the work that you're doing and they'll be like, okay, wow, this person really cares about the community and is interested in doing this. And again, I've seen this in my own life when I first started contributing to the Julia community. That was just via being a mentor and an admin through Google Code-In. And I went and I did that work. And after that program was over, I reached out to a bunch of people who were running the Julia language. And I was like, hey, I'd be really interested in a sort of more official capacity where I can continue to do work like this. And they were like, of course, we saw the work that you did with Google Code-In. It was awesome. We're really grateful for that. We'd love to have you around. And that's, again, hopefully the sort of arc of contributing that folks will see and be able to leverage in their own careers. And again, sort of all of this culminates to helping find gaps in your own specific community and filling them. And again, I think this sort of builds notion in my mind of this connected ecosystem, and you can sort of hopefully see that with this animation on the screen. But that's the goal, and I hope that this is helpful to folks and they're able to take away and understand how to make non-technical contributions in the open source community. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.